We've got to be willing to look at our relationship with time right now. When we say, I don't have any time, it's telling you that you're busy. Well, anyone you may say, oh, how are you going? Oh, I'm busy. It's almost become the new I'm good, thanks. Like, yep. I'm busy. It becomes like this self-fulfilling prophecy and a competition to, see how busy we all are. That's what I've noticed.
Joining us all the way from Australia is the insightful and inspiring Gavin Grift. Gavin is a celebrated author, dynamic speaker, and the founder of Grift Education. In today's episode, we'll dive into some powerful concepts, including the idea that clarity precedes competence, how reframing hardships can transform them into stepping stones for growth, and the critical role self-awareness plays in impactful leadership. As the driving force to our conversation today, we're going to dive into Gavin's brilliant book, Emerge, Overcoming Common Challenges Associated with Middle Leadership, and the invaluable lessons this wonderful resource has to offer. Now, before we begin our conversation, I'm excited to share that Charlie Peck and I have a brand new book, The Language of Behavior, which is launching in just a few weeks. It's packed full with practical strategies to support students, their behavior, and build stronger connections. Make sure you head over to the show notes to click on the link for more information and to pre-order the book. We're so excited for you to have an opportunity to use this resource in your classroom, your school, or your district. Now, let's start the conversation with the wonderful Gavin Grift. Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. All right, welcome back, Aspire Leaders. I am so excited to have a fantastic guest, educator, leader, author, someone who I've had an opportunity to read his fantastic book. And for those who are watching on YouTube, I'm going to show you the cover, which is gorgeous, but Emerge, the 5 most common challenges faced by middle leaders and how to overcome them. And Gavin Grift, thank you so much for joining me on Aspire to Lead.
Thanks, Joshua. I'm just so happy to be here and that you've allowed me to come on and have a chat with you.
Well, of course, I've had your book. I've had a chance to go through it, and it is very impactful. I know, we were talking beforehand, and a lot of folks have felt like this is a powerful resource that can help them. And I'm super excited about the conversation we're going to have today, not only about this book, but about all the wonderful things that you're doing. But before we do that, Gavin, will you just share a little bit about yourself, about your educational leadership journey?
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because I could take half an hour, but I'll try and take half a minute. I'm sort of in 30 plus years I've been serving education. I started teaching when I was 20. I was very young, back in the days when you did 3 years at university and then went and did a 4th later, and really started my journey in the first 15 years as a primary school teacher or elementary school teacher, or maybe it was more middle school for America, but year 5 and 6, and then moved into the high school for 3 years. And then, long story short, wrote a book called Assessing the Whole Child with a colleague, which captured the ideas around student-led conferences and portfolios that we were doing. And I got introduced to a publisher here in Australia by the name of Elaine Brownlow, who owned Hawker Brownlow Education, and she thought it'd be a good idea to publish it, and my career took a completely different turn. So since then, I've been working in schools, with schools and systems in the development of their work. The agency piece still is central, but it moved to people, to teams, to schools, in a sense, probably a good way to summarize it. And yeah, that's led me to where I am today, which is the founder of my own company over the last 5 years, which is a publishing house, a professional learning company, and an events company. We do a whole lot of work in Australia, New Zealand, and worldwide, actually, to bring not just my ideas, but other people's great ideas around that concept of empowerment to educators. I'm not getting less passionate about education. If anything, I'm getting more passionate about it as the world evolves. So I said I'd take half a minute. That was probably a minute, so I'll stop. That gives you a little bit of a background.
Well, I've seen your bio. I've been on your website. I mean, you have a ton of experience. So, I mean, it's going to take more than half a minute. And you have made such an impact globally. You're going to be in my backyard not too far from now in Denver. So I'm super excited to have you in the States. And what are you doing close to where I'm at?
So I've worked closely for nearly 15 years with the organisation Thinking Collaborative that are based out of the United States, but do all of their work internationally. I'm one of their, longest standing associates internationally. And so do a lot of the cognitive coaching seminar work and have been doing that for quite some time. And they asked me to come in and keynote for their symposium around some of the ideas that sit at the heart of 3 of my publications, but lend themselves beautifully to the work we do in that place.
I'm excited to have you here close to the mountains and unfortunately with a lot of cold weather.
Right. We've got the extra suitcase and then stocking up on the fluids. So all good. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, let's dive into your book, Emerge. So This is a beautiful resource, like I said earlier. And, you really outlined some challenges, some common challenges associated with middle leadership. And I would love for you to kind of set the stage with some of the common challenges that we've seen really across the globe. It's not just one country.
It's certainly not one country, and probably not even one domain in terms of just middle leadership. That's
Sure.
just more been where I guess a lot of my work's situated, or at least my support work. It just to backtrack a little bit, a lot of the work that I did, particularly in cognitive coaching and middle leadership and coaching, I run my own private coaching practice for educators, and it seemed to me time and time again the same challenges would start to surface. And so I was just very curious about how does this align with the research? And there's an emerging body of research in the middle leadership space, which we're privy to now that we probably weren't as much earlier days. And that kind of fueled the curiosity. And there were things like, how do you overcome the need to be liked? How does that become a stumbling block in your in your capacity to lead an organization? How do you overcome overwhelm? How do I lead when I'm feeling overwhelmed myself, or I'm leading something I don't want to be leading, for example? The classic question, which is probably on everybody's lips, around the place, is how do you work with difficult people? And particularly as you have to build your influence as a leader, which I always say the first thing is to maybe not call them difficult. That will help. And then we get into what that means. So there are three of them. The imposter syndrome, which I call the pleaser, self-limiting beliefs, really. And I've been kind of paralyzed by that over the years at different times in my journey. So it was both personal, but it's also prevalent in the research, and overcoming a lack of time. I think if you ask any educator anywhere in the world, finish this STEM, we don't have enough, they'll all say time. And I'm really fascinated in my own life and in how I professionally and personally, how I relate to time. And I thought this is a really important thing we need to look at. Not so much how do we manage our time, but what's our relationship with time and how do we view time, and is that helping or hindering? So there's obviously many challenges. It's very nuanced. It's contextually dependent and so forth. But for me, they were some fairly universal truths that spoke to me personally and also spoke to me from the field of research.
Yeah. I mean, you have a whole chapter on the pleaser, and I would love to kind of dive into that specifically because as a new leader, I mean, I definitely fell into this category of wanting to make sure that everyone liked me, that I didn't rock the boat in any way. And eventually I felt caught in between a hard place and a rock because at some point I had to make a decision, and it wasn't going to always make somebody happy. And I think as a new leader, how do we navigate that? And how do we kind of overcome the idea that we want to please every single person that we serve?
Right. And I think it's very much a personality thing, and there's so many components to that are complex. But if we just look at it through the lens of education, most educators I've ever met and know are just good people who want to make the biggest difference in the lives of people. Yeah. And so I think it's also a very, well, not unique, but a very distinctive aspect of leadership in education, because we come from that place. We're compassionate people who want to make a difference for all, not just some that agree with me. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a really important piece more broadly in general.
Okay, so I want to dive into another piece. The clarity precedes competence. What does that mean to you, and how does that impact our leaders that are listening?
Wow, it's a big question, and I know it's in the book. I was struck by that because I did a lot of work, and still do, with Richard and Becky DeFore in the United States. In fact, they were mentors of mine, and I brought a lot of their ideas, their thinking, and their colleagues' work, Bob Akers included, to Australia as part of the PLC movement. And one of the terms that I heard, particularly at the institutes I went to and then in further mentorship, was you can't lead a school without clarity about the type of school we want to lead. And so a lot of my work with schools around that cultivating a collaborative culture space was around getting everybody clear about what do we mean when we use the word professional learning community. You can't work towards something without sort of that clarity. And I use that example in the book because I place it at the heart of, well, what do you want for you as a leader? Like the same principle applies. What do you want to get out of leadership? What does leadership mean for you? And in the context of the book, let's get clear about what let's distinguish between what we mean by middle leadership, and let's also distinguish what we mean by self-awareness, because the book essentially is a self-awareness sort of lever. So I use that concept for that reason, because as the saying or the phrase goes, we're going to be more likely to be competent in whatever context if we just have some clarity about maybe not necessarily how to get there, but about what it looks like or what we're striving for in order to do so. And so that's why it kind of sat up front in the book, but it certainly had been a much bigger part of my professional life over the years.
Yeah. It kind of dawned on me too. I was reflecting as I was reading this, as far as just some of the initiatives that had a good idea. It was perfect for what was the needs of the campus. However, communication was the downfall of the progress in that. And then I started to think, okay, communication just as a whole, and that clarity piece, and how that has gotten in the way of so many things and made things either so much better or so much worse as a leader. And I'm just curious with you in regards to communication, what are some things that our leaders can do to help clarify and make sure everyone's on the same page?
Well, I think first of all, it's getting clear with yourself. I mean, if you think about generally communication, and we do this work in cognitive coaching as well to some degree, we teach some of this, but when you think about, I think as a teacher, I used to have to teach subjects and discipline areas where my expertise didn't lie, and I didn't have the same depth of knowledge that I did as in other areas such as English. Mm-hmm. And so if you had have recorded me and heard what I was saying as I was teaching, you would have heard a very distinct difference between the two ways that I was communicating. More general and vague use of language in the area that I wasn't as familiar with. I would have probably been meandering through and stumbling a bit in what I wanted them to do. I may have spoken for longer when it could have been spoken in a lot shorter form. And I think the same is true for us as leaders. Sure, there is learning by doing. We need to learn by doing. But alongside of that is a responsibility to understand why we're doing it and what that might look like in order to create the clarity for us to communicate those pieces clearly. There is no one way. There's no panacea of leadership, Otherwise, it wouldn't be 3 million books out there when you Google search. All right. There isn't. And I was passionate about that too. But there is. And I think there's some agreement, in the field of leadership that you've got to have some clarity around who you are and what you're striving for in order to communicate clearly with the people that you're working with and the people you're trying to bring into your story. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, that's one piece of advice, certainly, that I'd be giving leaders. And that I continue to try and do myself in my own leadership, in my own organization. Even just yesterday, I had a best big team meeting and reminded myself of what I had to say, why I had to say it, why it was important, spent half an hour beforehand being clear so that, my employees walked away with some, at least, clarity on what we're needing to do and focus on, even if we're not necessarily clear of the way.
For sure. You had talked a lot about, so far in leadership, just that reflection process. Curious what you think the role of self-awareness is in leadership.
Well, I think self-awareness is integral to human growth more generally. And so the more we can cultivate self-awareness in our own lives, the more that's going to benefit us and benefit those around us. And not all the time. I mean, I think what I talk about in my programs, and which is self-awareness, same in this book, is you've got to know where to apply self-awareness, where to practice self-awareness, because most of the time we're on autopilot. We're good to be on autopilot. But there are moments like, I've got a need to be liked and it's getting in the way of my leadership, where we probably need to stop, take stock and think of some ways and have some techniques and tools to elevate our awareness of self and check in. How is this serving me? How is this serving my organization? How is this serving others? What might I need to think differently? What am I feeling? And how might I kind of accept that, but try and work with it? And how is it showing up? And I think, for me, self-awareness is, really just wound up in human growth and development in so many different contexts. And for leaders who are seeking impact and influence and, I hope, fulfillment for them and those they serve, then it's almost a prerequisite. It's in my journey. It's something I haven't fully understood previously. It's been confused with words like consciousness and mindfulness and other terms, and clarity precedes competence. And sometimes the work to do on self is harder than the work to do with and on others. And so I think that's one of the very reasons why it's important, though, because if how we show up is an extension of what we value and what we believe, and how we show up is what people notice as we lead them, then self-awareness really is a pretty critical ingredient in that.
Oh, said beautifully. All right. So Gavin, you had talked about time and just this idea of kind of in your own life, trying to figure out the different ways that you can maybe use time best serve yourself. I know for myself as a leader, and I haven't even figured this out until lately, that I used to keep myself busy. So I didn't really have to do anything in regards to self-awareness as far as working on myself, as serve others. And for those who feel like they don't have enough time to do anything for themselves, maybe in their reflection process, maybe, like you said, taking time to be clear on why we're doing the things that we're doing. What do I want to do, or who do I want to be as a leader moving forward? In regards to time, what are some strategies that you have maybe done yourself, or maybe you teach others to do to help them maybe carve out a little bit of time for themselves to take care of all of these different practices that we've talked today?
Well, there are strategies, and I'll share one in a moment, but I think it's important to preface this with, it's not so much the strategy or approach I use, but the relationship I have to time and how I see it that has shifted how I work with it.
Nice.
I mean, I was very much influenced by a book called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, an amazing book, and we don't publish it, so no conflict of interest. Buy it to your heart's content. The 4,000 weeks is how long we've got on the planet if we live to 80. And he really frames some of the misnomers, I guess, of time and even time management, and had me really challenge my thinking around, am I valuing and respecting my time on this planet as much as I should? Am I actually really building boundaries around some of the things that I'm doing in order to be my best version of self? And so I think part of it is we've got to be willing to look at our relationship with time right now. When we say, I don't have any time, it's telling you that you're busy. Well, anyone you may say, oh, how are you going? Oh, I'm busy. It's almost become the new I'm good, thanks. Like, yep. I'm busy. It becomes like this self-fulfilling prophecy and a competition to, see how busy we all are. That's what I've noticed, and myself included. I hear it in myself and go, I just said I'm busy.
I just did that earlier today, now that you're saying that, Gavin.
Right? That's right. I mean, we're human, but what it does, see, but I said, oh my God, I just said I'm busy. See, that's that self-awareness bit going, that's not helpful. I am busy, but it also sends a message that, maybe you're, not that we mean it this way, but maybe, I'm busier than you, or you're not as busy as I am. I mean, everybody's busy in their heads. We're chattering to ourselves all day. So I think that would be the first thing is, and we talk about this and we uncover a little bit about what's our current relationship to time and how do we view it. And then we look at strategies like I just shared with you before. We do have the opportunities during a busy day, because busy often means we're busy in the head, not busy doing things. Even in the workplace, even in a school setting, it's a relentless place, right? And schools are relentless.
Yep.
I always say to people, if you don't like people, it's like life sentence with hard labor. It's one of the most interactive jobs you could possibly ever do. And it's energy sapping. So I'm not diminishing what it is. It really is. And it's complex, and I understand all of that. But we do have opportunities and moments in our day where we can make different decisions. No, time matters to me. If this parent's coming in and I've got to really work hard at this parent of being the best that I can be in representing the school, myself, and the situation and their child, or whatever the situation, I can give myself 5 minutes. I can say, I've got 5 minutes, you can sit there and give that 5 minutes, unless of course they've just barged through and, I'm taking you hostage. But I can give myself that 5 minutes and stop and just have a think about centering me, and reminding myself of who I need to be, what I'm going to say, what I'm not going to say, and focus on my breathing, and then, have the meeting. And that's a very micro example, but I hope my work encourages people to do is to see how you can weave this into the everyday, and you take a deeper look at how you're relating to time so that you can then work with it. Not even, I'm hesitant to say take control of it, because I don't think that's helpful either, but to work with it in ways that don't overwhelm you or contribute to your angst.
Yeah, so true. Okay, I want to touch on the second half, if you will, of the book, or maybe it's the majority, is you've got these titles of different things. We've talked about the pleaser, and the next one I would love to touch on is the ostrich. I know we're going to run out of time if we go through every single one, but I really want folks who are listening to right away click on the link that's in the show notes and grab this book, because it's powerful. But will you just share a little bit about this category, if you will, for the ostrich?
Yeah, so I call them archetypes, Joshua. They're really archetypes, these, and I did that deliberately so people just had a model to hold on to, and they could kind of explore themselves through those. And the ostrich is one, because this one, again, pretty personal. I mean, most writers also write about the very things they want to become for themselves.
For sure.
And so the ostrich really centers around that constant, even if it's not constant, it's a very unsettling feeling of overwhelm. And that feeds into, you can feel it in the pit of your stomach. It grows through a physiological response to anxiety, I guess, and fear even, that we're not necessarily doing the right, doing the job we need to do, or doing as much of it as we should be doing, or whatever. The list kind of goes on. And I just frame up in the book, what I'm trying to do is not label things. I don't like labels. In fact, I'm very anti-label, but it's saying the ostrich will appear. If we use common language, we can say, oh, there's the ostrich. Okay. Now, what might I do? How do I know the ostrich has appeared? Well, I'm lacking focus. I'm actually lacking some motivation here. I'm tending to complain quite a lot, and I'm complaining a lot, which obviously, it contributes to a toxic culture, but also is not helping me do the job that I need to do. And so I just frame up some of the ways you can tell that that's happening. Maybe you're feeling a bit out of your depth, or, it quits to the pleaser. I'm not feeling as though this is something that I can do well. And then I just provide some options, some ways you can leverage your self-awareness to think about it differently, to challenge the way you're feeling about it, accept it, honor it, but then say, I've got a choice about how I can feel about this, but I may need to think about it in different ways. And then, use some of those strategies to help people. It might be, if it's a deeper issue, it might be looking deeper at values. Is there a values conflict here? If it's more a management issue, breaking it down, which helped me a lot in one particular part of my career that I wrote about, where I nearly was lost to the profession. So, breaking things down, making them seem more manageable. There's so many strategies and approaches that are not unique to me or my work, but what I'm trying to do is lead people to some of those if they're not familiar, and put it in a frame where they can maybe use self-awareness to overcome when that ostrich, appears. Are you in those moments seeking support? I mean, I tend to think I'm a really good communicator, but what I've noticed, and I wouldn't mind mentioning one other thing about this before we finish, but what I've noticed is I sometimes communicate better in my own head than what people are hearing. And it tends to happen when I'm overwhelmed, because the overwhelmed feeling can, bring me into rumination. And rumination is the counter of self-awareness. It's not helpful, whereas self-awareness is very helpful. And so what I'm wanting to do is to just, give people the opportunity to then utilize that and recognize that, and then give them some strategies to try and overcome them. And the thing I was going to add was, maybe I'm not seeking enough support. Maybe I'm not communicating to people as much as I would like. Maybe I'm not asking for people's help, right? So that could be one way in which I can overcome overwhelm. Or maybe I can go to my caring critic, the caring critic is someone who you're checking in with to see whether your read on the situation is their read on the situation. Someone who really has your best interests at heart. They'll tell you the honest truth because they care about you and they want the best for you. And they give you feedback that can genuinely eliminate some blind spots and help you. I've found that that's a really powerful part of our program, and it's not something that we ordinarily seek. We're often given a lot of feedback, whether we want it or not, but I'm not talking about that kind of feedback. And I think that's something that we touch on too in the book. Now, I know that was a bit of a rant or a bit of a weave, but yeah, I think that gives your listeners just a little bit more meat around what the archetypes are and how they're framed in the book.
Yeah, those archetypes were beautiful because I didn't feel like they were labels at all, but I did see myself in each one at different times of stress or throughout the year. I think any leader that's reading this is going to be like, yep, I've felt that before. I've been there. So, how can I, like you said, that self-awareness piece of identify that I'm in this stage here, and what are some things that I can do to get out of it to be a better leader moving forward? So with that, Gavin, I wanted to touch on your business because I know you support educators all over the world, like we said before, but I would love for you just to share a little bit about, when folks go to your website, what they might be able to find, but then also services that you provide to help those who are listening.
Oh, sure. Thanks. Well, we're a publishing house as well. So we have a range of different resources to help. Really, there's 4 pillars of our business there. It's instruction, being the best we can be in our craft, leadership, which is obviously what we're talking about here, coaching, which has been a massive part, particularly cognitive coaching, which has been a huge part of my career and a real transformational game changer, and collaboration, how we really genuinely cultivate collaboration. Most of my work will sit around that in some way, shape or form, very sort of loosely. They're the pillars. And you'll find resources, programs that are based on my body of work or our body of work. I've co-authored many books. We also represent other people's work that I have felt has really been transformational, either for me or for others. So we do that. And we also run events from time to time, or can bring an event to you. So that's in a synopsis. It makes me tired thinking about what we do, so I don't talk about it anymore. But that's, in a nutshell, that would be, what we do. It's really, we've got the tagline of empowering educators, which runs the risk of being really cliche. We spend a couple of days on 2 words. Because really, essentially, that's what we're trying to do, is to not all educators feel very empowered in our experience. So helping them to develop power and authority over their own decisions and professional lives in a way that helps to really transform what they do or helps them work out what it is that they really want to do or do it better. Essentially, that's what we are committed to doing. Awesome. So most of those services and products you can find on our website at grifteducation.com.
Yeah. Well, I have the website, like I said, on the screen for those who are viewing on YouTube. So thank you for those who are watching. And then for those who are listed on the podcast applications, you can find this wonderful website. And it really is a beautiful website for those who are listening. Head over there. You're going to find a ton of resources, and obviously highly suggest you not only get the book, but reach out to Gavin and connect with him and make sure that you are feeling empowered, because that is something that is lacking in the world of education. With that, Gavin, I'd love to move over real quick to just a question I ask all my guests. For those who are listening that can do something tomorrow or next week to enhance their leadership journey, what would you recommend?
Well, it won't be surprising for you to say exercise and practice self-awareness, but be strategic about when you do it. And if you're not sure of what that even means, it's a very big research and have a look. There's so many great things out there. And I don't just mean buy my book. I really honestly mean just research it and apply them to a challenge. I mean, because there's also a lot of research on when to apply self-awareness so that you genuinely grow. Well, as a leader, I've grown the most and developed the most when I've just paused, used some tools, and really gone internal. And whether that's been with support, generally it's been with support, but that work on myself, and then sort of self-mediated my way through the situation in order to come out, different, stronger, more resilient, or, more engaging, more influential. So I think that would be the takeaway. When things are getting tough and you feel like you kind of, are a bit of that ostrich or things are going on, that's a clue. Just pause. You get better at self-awareness through obviously introspection, through practicing reflection and utilizing it at times that matter most for you. I wish I wrote this book for my younger self. Like, I wish I had this book in my hand when I first became a middle leader way back in my late 20s, which I'm far from now. I want that for leaders. However that comes about, I want them to commit to that idea and then take that wherever they can.
Yeah, wise words. And I will say that, unfortunately, I was on the back end of leadership when I started doing these practices. And I got to the point where I was breaking before I started to actually look into everything you're saying. And I would just highlight the fact that these are wise words by Gavin. And if you're early in your leadership, these are practices you need to start now because they are so vital for you. And I will even say that when I started these practices, that people noticed. Like, it was in my face, it was in my energy, it was in my body, the way that I interacted with other people. People even said to me and to my face, there's a difference. And that was noticeable to them in even short interactions. So there's power in what you're saying, for sure.
There is. Before we finish, I was thinking it's ironic, isn't it? Because in some ways, self-awareness helps you to get out of your own head.
Yep.
And become more powerful. I think it's the antidote to rumination. But there's a lot of work that you can find out about to help you to do that.
Awesome. Gavin, before we end our conversation today, I would love for you to share, obviously we talked about your website, but is there any other social media that people can connect with you?
Mostly me is on LinkedIn. I'd say it's probably the thing I'm most active on. Our company has one. Obviously, they've got Grift Education as the handle for Instagram and Facebook. I think there's a Grift Education one too for LinkedIn.
Sure.
I'm not great on social media. I have it's one of the things I practice in my relationship with time.
There you go.
That is a whole other podcast, right, Josh? I know.
Right.
But for me, I only engage because I want it to be meaningful and I've got something I really want to say or something I want to share or something that I want to learn from other people. So it's mainly LinkedIn, but in terms of our company and the things that we do, there's certainly the other kind of usual suspects that you can get some of our updates and information on. And I really appreciate you, by the way, the opportunity to speak about some of my work and what we do. It's really...
Oh my gosh, Gavin, it's been a pure honor and pleasure. And I always think of this podcast as exercise of the mind. After every conversation, and especially tonight, I just feel energized and feel like there's a lot of words and insights and wisdom that people are going to gather from just what's been spoken. So everyone that's listening, head over to Gavin's wonderful website, and then I'll make sure I have the other social media links in there for you all to connect with him and make sure that you're using him in any role that you have to enhance not only yourself, but your campus, your district. With that, Gavin, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for pouring into these books, pouring into educators and all the fantastic work that you're doing all over the world.
Oh, thank you so much. I just hope you're not too energized that you can't go to sleep. I think it's probably bedtime for you, even though it's the middle of the day for me. So I thought, oh, God, I hope you're not up for half the night. But anyway, all good. No, I really appreciate it again. Thanks for the opportunity, and I look forward to getting to your part of the world next week.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.